Hello, project people. You're listening to the Project Chatter podcast, your number one trusted source for project experts in audio form. I am your host, Mr. Val Matthews, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Dao Fung.
Hello, folks. Hello, everyone. Hello, Val. It is amazing. Another week, another fantastic pod lined up. And I know I say this on every episode, but I am really, really excited today about our guest and the topic and what we're going to get from this. So yeah, really keen, Val.
I know. I don't want to give anything away either, so I'm going to keep it completely quiet. I'm with you though. And just a reminder before we get into it, for our listeners to hit that subscribe button and listen to us on whichever platform you listen to your good podcasts on. Check out our YouTube channel where we are in video form for the full podcast and our guest bonus bits and Q&A. And if you'd like to sponsor us, check out the podcast and get in touch with us, projectchatterpodcast.com. And now let's get into it. So this time we are joined by Mr. Kenneth Harris to talk about NASA projects. Hi, Ken. Welcome to the show, mate.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. You guys really have those radio voices, and I don't feel like my voice comes across as powerful as you are, but thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here.
No, it's our pleasure to host you. Before we get into the thick of it and talk about space projects, I'd like Dale to take you through Ken's bio.
Yeah, this is brilliant. I hope everyone is buckled in when they listen to this amazing, amazing bio. Here it is. So recently acknowledged by Forbes Magazine amongst the world's youngest and most impactful individuals in the field of science, Kenneth F. Harris II is known for delivering thoughtful and dynamic leadership on programs of critical, national, and international importance. Kenny is a senior project engineer for the NASA J2 Joint Polar Satellite System and HERMES missions. Did I get that right? I hope I did.
Yeah, that's right.
In this role, Kenny is responsible for developing procedures and implementing processes to defend on-orbit satellites from physical and cyber threats. The satellite asset protection procedures and analysis will allow spacecraft to be monitored for hackers and anomalous threats from the designated Operations Control Center. Since joining NASA in 2008 as an intern, Ken held positions of increasing responsibility, including mechanical engineer, integration and testing lab manager, deputy lead integration engineer, senior systems engineer, and database lead engineer. Kenny's honors and awards extend beyond his professional service to recognition of his tremendous leadership in the STEM field and international community. In 2018, Kenny delivered a TEDx talk to over 500 plus students concerning the power of mentorship and guidance. He was internationally recognized in the Project Management Institute Future 50 in 2020 for his incredible leadership at NASA on the local and international level. Ken is currently a doctoral candidate at George Washington University. When not leading space programs or inspiring students to realize their full potential, Kenny enjoys fine cuisine, traveling internationally, and owns and operates a non-profit organization. Wow, I think you just forgot there, Kenny. The last 6 months have been quite transformational for you.
Oh yeah.
With the little one coming along. But no, amazing to have you, and hope those sleepless nights aren't too bad.
Yeah, they're slowly coming to, I don't want to say end, because I feel like that'll kind of jinx it. He just got into that phase where he's actually sleeping for longer periods of time now. But I talk to other parents and that's short-lived. It'll be back to normal in no time. So sleep while you can.
Exactly. Sleep while you can. And yeah, so I know from bits of your bio you sent across as well. You're lifelong in Maryland as well. Good part of the States there. I've been over myself, and I do like that part. But thank you for joining us all the way across the pond. We've got 3 time zones again, which is truly amazing technology today. But I do want to ask, how does one get into NASA? Was it a conscious choice for you, or was was it something that you just kind of went, okay, I'm kind of done with my studies now, or I want to get into work and what's available? How did you get into NASA?
So it's twofold. I like to lead with the story of, you know, as a young kid, I really didn't listen to my mom a whole lot. I mean, who doesn't as a young kid, right? So it basically came down to the point where we were ending a school year. I think it was my freshman year of high school, rolling into the summer. She said, "Hey, you got to get a job." I said, okay, you know, just nodded my head, went back to playing basketball, doing whatever I was doing. And I did not go and get a job. long story short, she came back one day and was like, "Hey, this is the only thing available in the area that at that time I didn't drive." And we didn't have a ton of public transportation near the house. So she was like, "Hey, this is what it is. You're going to be a janitor. So you're a custodian. You're going to clean the school for the summer." So I cleaned the local high school, Bowie High School. I cleaned it, you know, bathrooms, scraped the gum off the bottom of the desk, sweeping, mopping, all that for summer. And I was like, "Hey, this is a really humbling experience. I don't want to do that again." Roll around, and we're in during the springtime, and I have a little sister who was really into science at the time. And she went to this summer camp, not summer camp, this spring, kind of really short spring camp. And I went there just as a counselor, because I basically had to watch her. At that spring camp, I met who happened to be the coordinator for the high school internship program, who asked me to apply. I applied, and the rest is pretty much history. And luckily, and I tell everyone that asks me this, kind of say, "Hey, you know, not everyone that gets into internships actually stay in their internships." So for me, it was a combination of multiple things. A, I had family that worked at the center, so that was always good. That could keep me really grounded. B, I took it amongst myself to go the extra mile in terms of, hey, what does this component do? What does that component do? How do these test results actually translate into the final mission? And I think my mentors liked my initiative, and they allowed me to come back during the school year. So I went to school about 10 minutes, a 10-minute, 15-minute walk from NASA. So it was easy enough for me to just go after school some days. And that's really what helped me develop into more of this person that really, really enjoyed being at NASA. Another thing that I can't get off the topic without saying it, my dad is also an engineer. So that's like the coolest thing ever, right? Like having a dad that's an engineer and being able to have that, you know, with you constantly every day. And he was a big motivation. But, you know, I always wanted to differentiate myself from him, because not only is he an engineer, but I'm also named after him. You know, I'm Kenneth Harris II. He is Kenneth Harris Sr. So I really made it a point to differentiate myself from him. And that's kind of how I got my start there.
That's truly amazing. And when you said basketball, Val sort of perked up there as well, because he's a huge fan. So you could probably go down that rabbit hole a little bit. But that's truly amazing. I just want to jump around a little bit with bits of your bio that you sent through. 2018 TEDx. Can you tell us a little about that experience? And because I'm really interested in mentorship and guidance, and I think part of this podcast is sharing with the next generation as well. Could you tell us a little bit about what you spoke about there, and just perhaps the message that you try to sort of deliver to your 500 plus students?
So the baseline of the message there was twofold. For my mentees, it was seek out mentors, be intentional about it. You know, do your due diligence on who it is that you're inviting into your life to help consult you basically for potentially the rest of your career. Not all mentors last that long, but potentially the rest of your career. And for my mentors, I need you all to step up and really be, again, intentional about who you see potential in, or who you think that you can help foster. And again, do it in such a way where you're just not doing it for your own recognition to say, "Oh, I have 500 mentees and none of them are really benefiting anything from you." So it was really to show both sides of the coin, because at that time, or still, I'm in a situation where I think I'm a mentee as well as a mentor. So it helps to be able to see both sides of things. So I think that's the real message I was trying to get across, speaking to both individual groups.
No, that's brilliant. And where can listeners go and find that? Is
it
on
so
YouTube or?
So the TEDx is TEDx Bethesda. It's in YouTube. It's on YouTube. And actually, fun fact, I haven't told anyone else this yet, but I'm actually giving another TEDx in Greece.
Awesome.
I won't be traveling there, unfortunately, but that one will be out probably September is when we're set to record it.
Can you share
so
the
I'll be
topic?
doing the
What topic have you got in mind?
So I'm not 100% sure yet. I don't know if I want to go the route of talking about space asset protection, which is huge, or if I want to actually talk about one of my newer projects, which is actually partnered up with one of my good friends in the UK.
Wow.
Surprisingly, yeah, and it taps into a different area that involves integration, but isn't space related. It's actually about it involves green and sustainable energy.
Let's do two topics that are very, very interesting. I can see your dog's joined us.
Oh yeah, just gonna walk through.
Awesome.
That is truly amazing, and I want to. I think what I personally want to get into, and Val will probably have other ideas, and obviously Kenny, you jump in as well, and
Yeah.
go whichever rabbit hole you want to go down, we go down as well. But I want to, I think, jump down the various challenges that you get in terms of NASA projects, because I think for those that don't know, that just see NASA as this sort of space exploration and this weird and wonderful thing we're doing,
it's mystery.
and Mars is in the news at the moment, right?
Yeah.
So we're like, what the hell goes on there? Do they have the same time constraints, same budget constraints, same resource constraints? Do they do QSRAs on their schedule? Things like that. Is it the same, or is it something completely different? And if there are differences, I'm keen to see what can we then adopt, because safety is critical. It is critical. We say it on all projects that safety is number one, but I'd imagine so for NASA projects that it's like it is beyond critical. But before we go there, after I've sort of given a big run up for that, I want to just jump to the end before we get to the middle. And I know I'm going all over the place here because my mind is just like, where do we go? But I also wanted to ask you, just beginning with the end in mind, for you personally, what is the ambition? Do you personally want to travel space one day? Is it one of your ambitions to get there? I just want to share, or I want you to share perhaps a bit about your dream, if that is a dream of yours.
Yeah, so my dream has evolved as my skill set has, I'll say. So definitely when I started this journey, I guess I'll start with the first part. Yes, I do hope to travel to space one day. I'll just kind of put that out there. But I know initially when I started and I started mechanical engineering, that's what I studied in school. I thought, hey, I just want to put stuff together. I remember when I was younger, I just told one of my mentees, this was honestly around the time where Transformers came out. Like the new,
awesome.
like the Michael Bay Transformers came out, and I was like, hey, we can do that. And that was that's just my youth talking, like, hey, we can really do this. And that was me. I was just hands-on. I just really wanted to see how components work and just wanted to build these magnificent structures that served a purpose. And slowly as I gained new skill sets, as I went outside of the role of mechanical engineering, I truly felt that I was being pulled in a more programmatic direction. And still with that, it allowed me to have that kind of oversight of different missions and different skill sets and different projects that you need. But the ambition of being an astronaut, and this is something, again, one of my astronaut mentors, because you need a mentor for everything. My astronaut mentors actually told me, like, hey, that should not be primary. It should just be something, if you make it along the way, that is what it is. But there's such a small pool of people that are selected for that. You don't want to hang your hat solely on that. And I completely understand it. I have no problem with someone telling me that, you should have a plan B. I don't think it's impossible to have a plan B. So along my route, I want to develop those skills, more programmatic skills, more overarching, I guess, quote unquote, system engineering skills. And then at the same time, kind of obviously work toward an astronaut candidate one day, or maybe I'm just going to go off and lead a project like Greg Robinson, who leads James Webb, or maybe be like NASA administrator. I don't know. I don't know what direction it goes. But at the very bottom line, I want to, I understand that it's bigger than me. So whatever I do, I want to make sure that I am paying it forward, giving it back in some way, and not be so buried in my work that I forget about everyone that poured into me along my journey. So that's kind of the foundation that I'm built on.
Yeah, that's excellent, Kenny. And it gives our listeners at least a little bit of an insight into dreams and goals, and they should check out your TEDx talk, obviously, because you can have a plan B, which, you know, for a lot of people, that's not an option. But definitely developing the skills along the journey and enjoying the process, I think, is something you're mentioning there as well, which is something Dale and I talk about all the time. Otherwise, you can go insane on these projects. These projects are very complex. And for someone who's been in NASA projects now for a little while, and I guess Dale had a few questions buried in his his excitement before. I'll probably just draw some of those out. I think so. One of them was around space asset protection, and it was launching a lot of the news. And Mr. Elon Musk, you know, apparently there was some conversation that, you know, a third of the satellites in space now are owned by Elon. There's an issue about space debris and junk in this in the sky, and how that's affecting not just other satellites, but also light pollution for observation equipment down here, looking at space and looking at planets. What's your view on that? What do we need to do to make space a little bit more governed, or is it okay and it's all just hype?
No, it's definitely not all hype. I'll say that this is an ongoing issue, ongoing conversation. I think, and circle back around to your question, I think one of the beauties of being in the space industry is that it is actually international. So, you know, you get the chance to work with people from different agencies around the world. And it's not just one country's problem. You know, I've been to a number of conferences where we are discussing space debris, where we are discussing whose responsibility is it to clean it up, when really it's everyone's responsibility. And then you have the concerns about, as new technology evolves, how are we going to continue to, you know, put things into orbit, which are already crowded, or how are we going to safely put humans again into orbit or launch them through these orbits? I know one of the main concerns, because we bring up Elon Musk, brilliant guy. We bring up Elon Musk. A concern that I know some of us had in the space industry specifically was, you know, he's very, very ambitious, and, you know, he just says, hey, this is the idea, we're going to go for it, X, Y, Z. And one of the big ideas he had a few years ago, I can't remember when, was that he wants to have, similar to a Tesla, he just wants to have satellites that fly autonomously through orbits. And obviously that concerns us a little bit, because we have humans in orbit. And going back to your comment, Dale, is that you know, safety is one of our biggest things, and that's just not for, you know, the Johnson Space Center, which is in Texas, but it's for NASA as a whole. You know, we want to make sure that our astronauts, cosmonauts, whatever it is, or whomever it is, are accounted for while up there. So I think that you know, being in this international playground, I'll say, is a beautiful thing, and we have those conversations often. But I don't think by any means is it hype. It's a difficult question to answer. I don't have the answer to it. I know it's ongoing. It's almost as difficult as, you know, who's cleaning up the ocean, except the ocean's more accessible. So it's kind of along that same wavelength.
Yeah, no, that's good points. I think and it is the precipice. It's a very exciting field to be in. Not a lot of people know much about what's happening in space, but we do hear a lot about Mr. Elon and his ambitious dreams to take over any industry of any interest. But going back to space projects in general, I know I used to work at a telecommunications company, and they used to launch the old satellites for rural Australia, and the planning that went into launch sites and shooting things into space. Have you been involved in the planning process, and what's involved in that at NASA?
The planning process of actually putting a satellite into space? So no, I haven't been involved in that directly. That's more of so indirectly, yes, because on every level you're always considering ultimately, will this thing make it to space? So you're thinking, what materials are built out of? Is it going to be too heavy? How will it function in space? Is it deployable? So on that thought process, yes. Integration, fabrication, design, yes. In terms of the vehicle that is used to launch it into space, or a rocket, no, I haven't worked on that. My expertise is more in payload development, spacecraft development, you know, solar array panels, things of that nature for the actual bird, we call it, or the satellite.
Yeah. And how do they, for that purpose of developing all the components, getting them together, they obviously have some type of project schedule. You obviously have a budget. You obviously have some type of time constraints. From what I understand, I think project management really was formed from NASA originally,
Yep.
or at least the Navy, the American Air Force. How does how has the, I guess, the project management element of that changed, or is it the same as other projects where you have time, cost, and quality, and you deliver to a time frame? Is it the same, or is it a little bit different?
No, I want to say it's the same. I will say that we specifically at NASA, I don't know if it's anywhere else. I can only speak for NASA, but we specifically build in a lot of margin for time. So slipping to the right is just something that happens all the time. Like because it can come down to something as noticeable as facilities that we need to use for testing. So let's say that we are testing one of our subsystems in a thermal chamber, but let's say another project has held up that thermal chamber for an additional 2 to 3 weeks because they didn't get the data that they wanted. Now it's more costly to kick them out of the chamber and then put us in and then put them back in the chamber. So, in good faith, we'll probably just say, hey, just keep it for XYZ. So we like to build in the margins for stuff like that might happen. But I mean, I feel like that's across any project. I think for us, again, just focus on the big things, scope, budget, schedule, and things like that. And I don't know how different it is compared to other industries. I do know that there is an extreme level of care when it comes to taking risk into consideration, and the budget is typically a little. I mean, not comparing it to like a defense budget, obviously, but the budget is typically a little on the plush side because you have to build a beta model, or we call it the Pathfinder model. And then after the Pathfinder model, then you actually build the bird that flies, or the flight model, which is actually more expensive than the Pathfinder because it's actually operational, it functions. So I think those might be kind of unique to the space industry specifically.
No, that's great. I think if we can get quite specific, then perhaps just to try and tease out maybe those nuances and differences.
Yeah.
I think based on the NASA risk and opportunity management plan that we've managed to find, there's quite a big cultural difference from what we can see with engineers, etc., talking constantly about risks and constantly trying to mitigate them. And from a construction or other industries backgrounds that we come from, it seems like that culture and behavior isn't at the same level as what this would suggest. And so I wonder if what we found is evident from your experience, if it is a cultural behavioral thing that you experience, that you're constantly talking about what can go wrong, and therefore can mitigate easier, earlier, whereas we find sometimes in construction projects, rail projects, other projects, that because risk is sometimes often done as a boxing exercise. Do you do risk management? Oh yes, I've got a risk register. It's there in Excel.
Right.
That these things mysteriously come back to bite the project in the bum, and they're late and they're overspent and no one knows why. And they often, or sometimes they do, they fail, or worse, contracts may get ended unceremoniously, shall we say. But I wonder if you could sort of share a bit of your experience and insight into the attitude towards risk.
So, how do I say this? When you think of a project specifically that is going into space, which is not easily accessible, you definitely want to approach risk in a different manner than you would a construction project, or really any project that's here on Earth. So some people see these satellites that we build as one-shot opportunities. And I think, and by no means does that mean that our deep dive of risk make everything 100%. You can look at Hubble, for example. Hubble's like the best example. I think you just look at Hubble and you think, okay, man, that was really messed up. Okay, cool. And I think that, so two perfect examples of how we approach risk is that or in the past, based on where it is in an orbit, some projects have decided that it is good to have their risk, knock out their risk, but also provide mitigations and have servicing missions be a possibility. I'll say no one really wants to say servicing missions are what we're going to do, but they are becoming more tangible because of humans living in orbit and things like that. Now, there are other satellites that might fly into Lagrange orbits, which are 1.5 million kilometers away from Earth, and those are not accessible. So it's like when you do risk for those, it's like, hey, this has to be right. And one of the best examples for that is the James Webb Space Telescope, which, if no one knows about, if the listeners don't know about it, that project has been delayed years, multiple times. And so it's set to launch this October, fingers crossed. But we handle risk in a different way, just because it's not something that you can. I think we have a different way of accepting certain risks. Like, you have your whole sheet of list, and some are just accepted risks that you have to live with. I think we are a little more stringent when it comes to what we accept and what we just have to mitigate, because oftentimes you have one shot. It's just you spend $75 million on a satellite, one shot, get it right. And even if your satellite doesn't work, even if your satellite works, then again, going back to Val's point, there's still a vehicle that has to transport it from here to orbit. So there's a number of risks that goes into the rocket design as well. So it's really a more of a merry song and dance kind of process. And I think that's really why we stress risk a whole lot, just because it's not as accessible as projects here on Earth.
Right. So it's all about that tolerance level of risk, and that's the significant difference there. What I'm hearing is perhaps it's not that risk methodology or risk management per se is different. It's the application and the different view and tolerance towards it.
Yeah, I don't think we approach risk any differently. I think we approach risk the exact same. I just think it certain mitigations that come to the table, or certain acceptances that come to the table, sometimes aren't acceptable for us.
Yeah.
And it's something that we just have to revisit based on our leadership, based on the subsystem, based on the orbit it's in. It's a number of different factors, and mission life is huge on that too. So it's a number of different factors, and each mission is pretty unique.
No, that's brilliant. I want to jump quickly, shift gears a little bit. Modeling, 3D modeling, 4D modeling, digital twins. We've spoken in the construction space, particularly with a lot of guests that have come onto the podcast, around how if we did 4D modeling or adopted it more broadly, projects would be more successful. Is it something that you do at NASA, where you do far more on the computer before you get into the real world, or is it not the case?
No, it's definitely the case. So it's definitely the case. And as you know, like working with any CAD model, some projects CAD the overall structure, while some CAD specifically all the way down to your screw set and your treads on your screws. NASA is one of those that do all the way down to the treads on the screw. Wow. And then the 4D modeling as well. And there's just a number of applications that will run our simulations for our tests against our CAD models before we might even fabricate. We might even fabricate an object. And there's been times where we do the 3D, we do the 4D, we actually come through and we get the physical hardware. And I remember I was at a meeting once, and I was younger and I didn't understand the concept of it, but we printed something. I forgot what it was. I think it was think about it almost like a rotor for a car. That's kind of what it looked like. And anyway, someone said, this is the part, and they picked it up and handed it to the project leader. And the project leader was like, this is way too heavy. This is way too heavy. We need to go back and redesign it. And we were like, hey, it's within all the thresholds that we decided to do it. It works, XYZ, and he made us design the whole thing again because it was too heavy. And so I don't understand why exactly that happened, but it gets down to kind of those small, minute details before we are able to move forward with the fabrication. But I definitely think 4D is used in NASA, but I think that if it's used more widely, you can potentially catch a lot more stuff. Simulations aren't 100%, so I don't want to praise simulations for being the gold standard, but but I definitely think it's a good catch-all.
No, that's great. It's, one of those things that you kind of assume because it's NASA, they must do it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I had to ask it just to get, from the horse's mouth confirmation that it happens.
Yeah. And it's not, of course, obviously it's not across every project per se, but a few projects I've worked on have utilized it. I don't know, and again, I don't want to speak for NASA as a whole. I don't know if it's a standard that's utilized. I think it's truly based on your budget. How much is this thing worth? How much time do we have, and ultimately who your leadership is, because some people might think 3D is enough. We don't need to do 4D. So if it's not a standard, then they won't use it.
Yeah. And we will say you're not speaking on behalf of NASA. You're just sharing your experience. So
right.
You just happen to have a lot of experience at NASA. No, that's great. You touched on that there a little bit, budgets and schedules, etc. I wonder, do your project managers at NASA get kicked as hard as some of the other project managers when they overspend and when they report bad news? Or is that tolerance level also slightly adjusted because what's more critical is safety and quality?
That is, again, based on a number of factors. It's not just a blanket of safety to say, hey, you took these additional risks, so it's okay, you went over budget, we'll give you some more money. That's not the case at all. They're going to look at what you spent it on, what were your results, what was the point of you doing this stuff? Because I mean, I can be extra sensitive and do all the tests possible for this one little component, and it could make a difference in the general scheme of the project. So if we have this whole subsystem, and I don't assemble the subsystem first, but I say, hey, I want to test, let's just say the icebox. So the icebox. Let's just say we'll take the icebox and we'll do a vibration test on the icebox. There's no point in doing that because you could have put the subsystem together and then did the icebox. So now did the full test. So now you've spent an additional $20K to do a $20K and a week and a half to do this vibration test when we could have done it later down the line. So it's by no means like a get out of jail free card. They're still going to look at what you spent it on, look at the point, and if you can justify it, sure. But and luckily I can say I've never been in a situation or known someone that's been in a situation where they're getting their hand slapped for overspending in not a appropriate manner, I'll say.
Yes. So all those project managers that were listening from other industries went, oh, okay, damn it, I can't move across into space. But anyway, but as you're talking there, I was thinking, as we've progressed and matured, we have a lot more data and information about space and what's out there. And I will hand to Val in a second, but one last kind of question before I hand to Val from me is, can you tell us about the coolest project you've worked on to date? What you did, what some of the challenges were on that, how you overcame them?
So I could honestly talk like a full hour on that, and I'm not gonna give you guys
the condensed version.
Yeah, let me give you the condensed version just because there's a number of projects, but it's definitely a tie between the Mars Curiosity rover, which is cool because I went to Mars, and the James Webb Space Telescope, which is set to explore the time frame around the Big Bang and shortly after the Dark Age. But I think from a humanistic point of view, my favorite project that I've worked on has been JPSS, a Joint Polar Satellite System, because it is an Earth-facing satellite that helps us get not only weather data from around the globe, but also to help secure human life. So it monitors natural disasters that occur around the world as well. So it did the Amazon rainforest fires, it did the Australia brush fires, and it also monitored a number of hurricanes that were approaching the east coast of the United States, and we're able to inform local authorities and able to do evacuations and things like that. So I think that is my favorite project because, again, from a humanistic point of view, it impacts the world in an amazing way and it saves lives. So that's my favorite project.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And those fires were, last year in Australia, they were terrible. And it's good that technology is actually giving us visibility, not just into space, but back on Earth as well, allowing us to monitor the environments and the trends, which is really interesting. And just going back to Dale's point before, you were talking about risk and safety and all these things, and I was just observing and listening. And it appears to me, at least from the conversations in the way you're saying it, there's a really proactive culture around safety and risk, which I think for anyone listening, perhaps that's the missing element where there isn't that. And we've seen a number of big projects outside of space overrun, quality issues, safety issues, and obviously budget issues. And I think it's more about having a kind of accountability. And you said something there that I just wanted to repeat for the listeners. If it's not a standard, they won't do it. And that's 100% correct. If it's not a standard, they won't actually comply. So things like 4D and model-based planning, we've been pushing this in Australia, I know as well in the UK, and it's not as widely adopted as we would think, but it's good to know that there is a leadership or a leader in the field. It's NASA, and we should emulate that. Why would we stop? So that's fantastic that you guys are getting in there. And I guess as part of the attraction of working there is you get to work on fun things, fun tools, and fun projects.
The coolest stuff.
The coolest stuff, and you get the coolest
already.
I know.
Oh yeah.
We're gonna have to head over there, Dale. This is gonna have to.
We do.
Yeah. Anytime, I'll give you a tour.
Oh, stop. We'll be there soon. So I wanted to talk about your favorite toys in terms of, you're in the engineering space, you're in the you're not planning, but you're in the project management space. What are the favorite toys you like to work with?
Oh man. So let me think. One of the coolest, it goes back and forth a lot, but I'll say that you want just in terms of programmatic tools or just tools we use as an engineer, and it can be anything from like a slide ruler all the way up to our testing environments. Is that kind of what you mean?
Absolutely. Whatever comes to mind. I think it's interesting because we got engineers that listen as well, and most project managers have some type of engineering background. I'm sure they'd love to hear that.
Yeah. So so the coolest one that I've worked with is Chamber A down in Texas, which is historic because it's the chamber that they tested the Apollo program in. And I got a chance to actually help to guide James Webb into that before it went through its not one of its final tests, but one of the final tests I worked on it for. So that was pretty cool, just because Chamber A is historic. It's there, but you in order to work on James Webb or any satellite really, you need a clean room environment. So we had to build it wasn't a pop-up tent, but we had to build a clean room around the Chamber A in order to then host James Webb into it or put James Webb into it. Which leads to my second thing. This isn't really a tool, but one environment that I really like to work in is the clean room environment. Super sterile environment that you have to put on the full bunny suit. You can only see like this part of your face. So everyone's walking around like, where's Kenny? Which one of you is Kenny? They knew because I was one of the shortest guys there, but that's again one of my favorite, you can call it a toy or environment to work in, because for working on satellites specifically, there's a very high level of or high sensitivity to contamination. So those are, I'd call them, I wouldn't call them toys per se. And the last thing I'd say is simulated environments. So when I was actually flying satellites, we used I don't know if I can say what we used. It was similar to STK. So like the satellite Toolkit, it was similar to that, which basically modeled the satellite's path that it flew on, and you were able to maneuver it, make it do its yaw maneuvers, its pitch, it's whatever you were trying to get it to do, and then actually have the data downloaded to its different sites. So there's a number of different things across different projects that I've been able to use. But that's a good question. I wasn't prepared for it. As you see, none of those are really like tools per se, but they're just things that I've read into.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, part of these podcasts that we really like doing is that they're conversational, and we talk about all sorts of things. And, when they come to mind, like toys and things we like to play with, I think, obviously you can't give away everything. You work for NASA, but it is an interesting insight into what gets you excited as well. I think people like to hear that too. And, from your experience on the project management side of things, we talk about the different methodologies that project management use to deliver a project. And you talk about there's variables in the projects you work in because there's dependencies. So if something doesn't go right, or you need access to a lab, or you need access to a certain area that's being shared with another project, how do you prioritize those dependencies, and who does that?
So we honestly have a whole different department that's job is basically facilities. So who has what facilities at what time, and they have kind of like these time blocks where you're allowed to use it. Obviously the financing goes through your project, but for us it's more of a scheduling thing. And similar to like getting on a waiting list at a super exclusive restaurant, you've got to do it months, sometime a year in advance. Yep. And if people jump off the schedule, then you can jump on the schedule. But for us, we've got a group that handles that for us, just the facilities group. And they're able to kind of plug and play folks as they deem necessary, which is really, really good for us. It kind of takes us off the plate, takes it off the plate for us and allows us to focus on the subsystems and what tests need to be done. And to go back to your other question, I forgot one other toy. It's not really a toy again, but if you look at any satellite really much across the board, you'll see it's wrapped in it looks like it's wrapped in aluminum foil. Yeah. There's individuals at Goddard specifically. Back in the day, like I'm super old. Back in the day, we used to refer to them as the blanket ladies. And it's literally these seamstress, like they have seamstress skills, and they actually make these blankets for satellites, and they're known as the blanket ladies. Oh, wow. And it's like one of the coolest places to go, because you say, hey, I have this satellite that's structured this certain way. I need it to stay warm in space. Can you make it a blanket? And that's kind of something that I've been doing for years, but they're super, super nice.
I don't think anyone's ever heard that before. I've certainly never read anything about that. That's fantastic. That sounds really cool, actually. Yeah. Gives them little cuddles when they go into space. That's good that we're looking after those satellites, keeping them looked after, loved before they get ejected from Earth. And one more from me before I hand off to Dale for another question. When you're working in these environments, when you wake up and you get to work, how do they structure the to-do list? Is there some type of system that they use to help you go, right, Kenny, these are the things you need to do today. These are critical, or these are the ones that are impacting other teams. Do they have some type of shopping list? Is it written on a wall? Is there some sexy new toy that they use for that? Or is it just a screen that you come in and you tick your list off?
So it's planned in terms of a schedule. It's just planned like anything else would normally be planned. Funny enough, NASA isn't that, at least the Goddard Space Flight Center isn't as technological as you'd expect, like any NASA center. I think people expect us to have like huge monitors places. Everything's touch screen. There's like a juice bar. Like, I don't know what they're expecting. but yeah, so we walk into the building, or we walk into our office, and we either will have a sprint in the morning to say, hey, this is what needs to be done, or someone will give us the download on what happened. Because sometimes we're on that's on flight missions. Sometimes they're on 24-hour shifts. But for when you're actually integrating, you just have you have procedures, work orders. So we're signing off on each line, and it's easy as picking it up and saying, oh, this person left off here, or this torque value is a little high. Okay, we need to pick it up here. And you can call that person and talk to that person and say, hey, where'd you leave off XYZ? It's a very team oriented environment. Like, there's no one I can't call and say, hey, like, and again, it wouldn't even come off the wrong way if I called them and say, hey, how did you get this value? This doesn't seem right to me. They wouldn't take offense to that. They would just say, oh, this is how I got it. Chuck screwed this in, and then we got this torque value, and we thought it was a little high, XYZ, but it falls within the standards. And that would be the conversation. And then we just picked it up from there.
Kenny, that's so good to hear, because very, very, very refreshing for some people listening, where it's clear that collaboration and communication and results oriented teams is what NASA is all about. And you don't, like you said, you don't need high technology to do that. Generally, it's a work order, or as we call them, work packages. You know what the scope of work is. If you're not really sure what the team previous or prior did, you give them a call, say, hey, or you go see them, even better, face to face. Back in the day, remember before COVID, we had physical interactions. Hey, you get on the phone and you would say, explain this to me, or this is going to impact the project. How can we work together to fix this? I really like the team orientation. And you mentioned a little bit about methodology, a bit of sprinting. So it's a bit of agile type delivery, which is really excellent. I'll hand over to Dale to ask you a few more questions.
Cheers, Val. Yeah, I want to get a little bit geeky, being project controls.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah,
let's do it.
Well, maybe not your type of geek. That's next level, Kenny. I'm still getting there to that level, but from a controls geeky perspective, right? And one of our primary functions is to, provide sort of governance, assurance to delivery, and to the organization that things are going well on track, and we got the right methodologies in place. And I know that obviously earned value management as a methodology was originally something that the US government brought in. So I'd imagine a lot of NASA projects, sort of utilized earned value management as a methodology for tracking, monitoring progress, etc. I just wonder, you spoke a little bit about the agile nature of how the working environment, the day to day. Are there sort of any prevalent methodologies that NASA uses, or is it a host of different ones to measure the success of their projects? We also talk in terms of infrastructure projects about benefits management, linking in with time, cost, and quality, etc. I'm just wondering if we get into that sort of geek space on project performance measurement and management, if there's any insight that you can provide from a NASA perspective.
So I think this is going to be kind of a back and forth between us, because you mentioned earlier about the world that you come from. So I'd obviously be interested to see how that is integrated into your world as well. So I think for us, again, there's no cookie cutter approach to building a satellite. So I think in that kind of answers the question of, is there just one methodology that we use? I think the only thing that I've seen that we are extremely consistent with is the use of agile thinking. I think that's the most common thing that I see across any NASA center. And that is because you don't build a satellite alone. You don't build a satellite with just the mechanical knowledge or just the electrical knowledge. It's really a team-based environment that we have to collaborate and have to talk through. And express, and you can even see it as the different man, they'll sit with my brain. The directors, as the directors pick and choose who they want to lead these different projects, you'll even see that in the leadership structure that they pick out. So they'll say, hey, I want Kenny to do this because I know he's had a history of this, but I also know that he works really well on this team, and this team's going to XYZ, but this team is also outward facing to this team. And now we know we can talk to them about XYZ. So I think from that point of view, agile is extremely, extremely consistent. And I imagine that in your field, that was something that was utilized as well. Yeah.
Yes and no. So my defense experience, there was elements of agile that we had. We had sprints, we had your stand-ups, etc., scrums, but that was predominantly because there was a big software element to it. In the rail industry that I've sort of been part of for the past few years, it's more waterfall based and more what are the requirements, how do we schedule the entire thing, critical path methodology, QSRAs, etc. I'm personally of the opinion that you do need a hybrid approach, and you need to, because Val will tell you this on almost every pod. I say, well, how can we possibly make projects a conveyor belt, because the very definition, it's a unique endeavor, with a definite start and a definite end. And so you can't have a one size fits all, as you say, a cookie cutter. So I do personally think that it should be a mix of both, and what that mix looks like depends on the actual project itself, the scope. For me, that's my personal view on it. And I don't know if organizations, one, understand or are equipped or mature enough perhaps to be able to perfectly, and I include myself in that, to perfectly have the right mix. But I think it's a little bit of trial and error, and I definitely feel that the agile elements work well. I think it's something when Val and I worked together, we brought in stand-ups, and we had the big Kanban board, and we have people stand around and go, who's doing this, who's doing that. And that was a little bit different. We brought that in. People weren't used to that. So all of a sudden, in an open office environment, we're not in in a meeting room discussing in a closed door. We're in open space. We're discussing with everyone. Everyone knows what's happening. It's not, project controls isn't just this thing that happens on a desktop computer or in a meeting room somewhere. People are hearing, oh, these guys are actually discussing more than just numbers and schedules and risks. They're actually discussing how can we help delivery achieve better delivery. So I see the advantages of agile being brought into a waterfall environment like that, but I think waterfall might be the wrong terminology as well. I think sometimes we try to structure projects too much, and you lose that agility and that flexibility that actually is required to adjust when it needs to adjust. And so for me, sometimes risk management processes, change control, for example, and I can't believe I'm saying this because, you know, our project controls, but sometimes that gets in the way of progress, because you have to go through the governance, you have to ensure that everyone's seen it, you have to have a meeting, and the meeting can only happen this day in this month, and so you have to wait until that point in time before you can approve the change, and then it can happen. But if you did that maybe a few weeks earlier, you could have saved a whole bunch of time and a whole bunch of money. And so I just, that's
So,
as you say, it's a back and forth. Go ahead, Kenny, jump in.
So do you think that's more of a lean approach, I guess, in terms of stuff like that? Because I noticed, at least from my point of view, and this could be different, I think lean approach is more appropriate when you are working toward deliverables for a customer. Whereas when you're doing NASA work specifically, you know, if you're the government, who's your customer? I guess the government technically, but but you're trying to meet your own deadline just based on budget at that point. So when it comes to implementing or you know, streamlining waste or streamlining different aspects of the project, how do you approach that as within the space sector specifically? And I think that's why we don't often see a whole lot of the lean methodology for us specifically. I mean, there's times where obviously we have to speed things up, but I think we do it more of from that Kanban style that you mentioned, in terms of we'll just slow down on the multitasking front, and we'll do it subsystem by subsystem, screw by screw, and we'll just do it like that. So I think that it's definitely plug and play, like you said, and it's definitely not just one methodology to go across the board.
No, it's an interesting one, because, and I think perhaps the more we talk about it, and hopefully this instigates, you know, people listening to think about it as well and go, are we just doing this because our company procedures say we have to do it this way, or is this actually adding value to delivering this project? And I guess the adding value bit, if you break that down even, is dependent on the triple constraint. You know, if if budget is your number one, then obviously is it adding value? In other words, are you delivering, you know, cheaper? You know,
is it a more efficient way to get it done?
If it's time, you know, is it adding value to delivering this quicker, etc. So I think it's a really, really interesting conversation. We could probably go round and round it many times and over. But Val, please do jump in.
I'm just observing it. It is, the triple constraints obviously there, but it's also situational. I think the volatility and the volume of change affects the type of projects that you're in. So there's criticality around delivering anything, whether the client's internal or not. But when you're self-fulfilling, I guess you can be a little bit more flexible, as you mentioned, Kenny, with those constraints. But they are still like, and particularly R&D projects, or those projects that are very, very unique. I think there's a spectrum of uniqueness. Whereas heavy rail, there's elements of that would be customized and bespoke to the environment. But rail is rail. You know, you get some tracks. There's some common elements now around technology that are difficult. And you find that the bits that Dale's alluding to that are hard to estimate and constrain within a waterfall environment are actually the software components, where you're testing, verifying in a lab, and then you have to go out on site and do the same thing. And then if there is change, that change there's no allowable kind of caveat for that within the constraints of the delivery parameters, because you've already committed a plan to the client. The client's saying, and then maybe this is around contract structuring as well, Kenny. Client saying, no, you said you're going to deliver this on Thursday, you know, and it's Wednesday afternoon, and you're saying it's not working. Clients are a lot more demanding, probably, and less forgiving than NASA, and they say, no, you cannot move that date. And if you do, there's ramifications, cost and time ramifications for that. So it's a very interesting conversation. I
was gonna say that's definitely something that has to be thought of from the beginning of that contract, even when you're just exploring the scope, even when it goes back to just writing a task order for what you plan on doing. And I think it's sometimes it's stuff you can't avoid. I remember I was working on a project one time where it was a weird transition. It was a group of people handled the task order, and the contract. Then several months later, I joined on the project as a PM, and the person that originally negotiated that left. And so we get to the end and we're delivering what is in the scope of work, what is on the contract. And the client comes back to us and says, no, that's not what we verbally agreed on back before you were hired. And so I'm like, it's not written down. So if it's not in that scope, how do you expect me to deliver it? And it's and that comes into the play of you being professional. You kind of handle the situation as best you can. But just to know, just what you were saying in terms of clients might not be too forgiving if it's outside of something that they think that they want. But that's just a part of the game, I'll say.
Yeah. Well, there's so much value in getting it right at the start, at least the expectation. So setting expectations, but you mentioned a few times that collaboration and communication piece should include the client. I think that's one of the good things that you adopt when you do the agile methodology is the client is meant to be part of that process. Whereas waterfall, it's more like a month-end report. Are you on time, budget, any concerns, etc. How does, obviously you got internal clients, so it's a little bit different. But how do you report project status on those, and how do you progress? I mean, testing and verifying is probably pretty transactional, so that's probably okay. But on a whole, how do you present that you're moving forward? Because I can understand with agile, sometimes there's no end in mind. It's more about features and functions and subsystems, and you can just keep going if you wanted to. If you don't define done, how do you report up there?
So that's a good question. And again, going back to my answer for pretty much everything so far, is every project's different. But a majority of projects that I worked on is just a series of, I think the dudes across industry, it's a series of reviews. So you'll have your design review, you have your product review, you have your systems review, and within those reviews is when you really produce the results of whatever you're working on. But on even a more immediate front, all of our procedures that we developed are signed off by some manager, whether it's from the customer, whether it's from, well, obviously it's a government lead on there, it's some government folks, and there's a customer and some customer folks on there, and that procedure is signed off by everyone. And as you go through that procedure and see the steps, so if we're integrating, if we're building an Apple iPod case, an AirPod case, for example, they'll sign off on each part of it to say, hey, today we put on the hood of it. Today we tested the charging. It was at this voltage. Oh, today we had to bring contamination, and contamination that's a funny story I'm not going to get into, but contamination had to come in and sign off on something because someone screwed something into the wrong torque value. And that is readily available within our CM system. So, it might just be as simple as a ping to say these tests are done, check them out, or things of that nature. But outside of that, we just have projects are different. But for my team, we have weekly tag ups with our customer to say this is what we've done this week, this is what we're looking forward to next week. And again, that's another one of those managerial methodologies that that you can explore as the PM for that program.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's more of a sum of the parts would add up to the. So if you got 100 tests and you do 20, you're 20% through, and that's how you'd run it. I guess that does change if there's things added into that sprint or that scope of work, but that does make sense to me as well.
So
great.
Based on what you do, it might extend the testing that you need to do, or it might extend the report that you give. But there's those reviews set in stone for you, and then you have those procedures set in stone. So there's always a method to find out the information if you really want to know the information.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. I mean, I don't know about Dale, but I'm a bit jealous. I want to go work over at NASA. What is fun about this is that not a lot of people get insight like this, Kenny. So we really appreciate your time. And I had a question about, for those that are our US listeners who are aspirational, who like to do fun things and play with fun toys, as you mentioned, how do they get into working at NASA? What can they do?
Ooh. So that's a question based on experience level, I guess. So my high schoolers keep striving at it. Obviously, go off for those internships are what's going to set you apart from anyone else that you're applying with. Make sure they know either you've done an internship, you've done a project, or you have some passion behind what you're doing. Because too many times we see folks we bring into the industry and they just check it off as a high school internship they did and don't continue on with it. And we really want to foster that passion that you have. So seek internships, seek those projects. College students, exact same thing. Structure your classes around you know, a specialty that you hope to go in. And even if you don't know your specialty, you know, really knock those classes out the park, talk to your professors, talk to anyone that comes to campus that might have the pull, and expand your network. Getting back into mentors and mentor-mentee relationships. That's exactly what it is, a mentorship. Build those networks early, because you never know who knows who can help you get to whatever level. And again, that's what's going to separate you from everyone else that you're applying with. My more seasoned professionals, everyone knows USA Jobs if you're in the US or Indeed or Monster, anything like that, right? So I invite you to obviously check out one of those. Again, it's never too late to get a new mentor. It's never too late to get a new mentee. I would say continue to foster and build those relationships, because specifically in the field of engineering, you know, it's, or specifically at NASA, I'll say, because I can only speak here, it comes to a point where it's great what you know, how much you know, but it really comes down to your passion, your determination, and who you know. Because at the end of the day, we are dealing with human life. We are dealing with millions and billions of dollars. We want to make sure that we are putting in the hands of folks that we know are very capable. Because when you get to Johnson Space Center, for example, you know, if you're working on the Artemis program, you are working on a project that would literally impact someone's family. Because if you send them to space and something goes wrong, you know, this person goes to our church, it goes to our grocery store. We see them every day. It's a very human to human interaction. So it comes with that level of trust. So again, you have to build your network. You have to know people. You have to establish yourself in order to get to that place. So again, great place to work. It's just, you know, like anywhere else, apply yourself and you'll get there.
Such good advice as well. Talking about passion in your profession, and letting that kind of come through as well, and aligning that with some mentors. Dale and I are big fans of having mentors in the industry. And just one more question before I hand over to Dale as well. You know, sometimes, and I've spoken to a few people, mainly youths, that are struggling to find mentors in their industry. What's your top tips for finding a mentor?
No. First, you have to know where or a general direction that you'd like to go. So if I want to have my own podcast, for example, I know that I have to seek out someone that has a podcast. I don't want to arbitrarily just seek out anyone. So obviously work within the confines of what you have. Secondly, I would say intentionally approach them. And what I tell my mentees is that what you need to do is make a first impression so that they want to have a second impression. Because too many times you show up at a conference and we're looking at, we're like, you know, you guys are seasoned professionals. So you go to a conference, everyone's handing you business cards. You might say, okay, I met that person, I had this business card. But I remember that guy, we were on that elevator, he gave me that great 30-second pitch, and he gave me his card and he told me a story about how he got in engineering, and I'm actually going to follow up, or I see his email and I'm actually going to remember him or her for that. So I would say make yourself unforgettable in that sense, you know, be relatable to the person. And again, meet them on a very humanistic level. Like, you know, you have to meet them there. You have to, again, treat it like a relationship. Don't just walk up to a person you want to be a mentor and say, hey, I need you to help me get into NASA, because now it's transactional. Now it's a business. And that's not what a mentor relationship is. So, yeah.
Such wise words. And I hope everyone listening to that heeds the call to, you know, one, have a mentor, and two, approach it in the right manner. But thanks, Kenny. Just touching on some of your early bits, it's so great to listen in as sort of the first listener, so to speak, and be part of the first line of audience, which is great. I love, it's one of the perks we always say being on this podcast. So thank you for all of that. But this does bring us to our feature. So drum roll.
Okay.
This is called Defend the Indefensible. Now, for this part, we'll bring in our in-house oracle, Mr. Martin Curriston, who's been in the background there, but he'll switch on his camera and he'll switch on his audio to take you through this, Kenny. So I hope you can defend this indefensible statement.
All right.
Yeah, thanks, Dale. Really enjoyed that. It was fascinating just hearing about NASA projects and just starting to demystify about the company. It's amazing. and all the processes. Right. So yeah, as Dale said, this brings us to Defend the Indefensible. It's a new feature that we're trialing on the podcast. It's where we invite our guests to defend a ridiculous statement for 30 seconds, something that's inspired by some of the ridiculous comments we've all heard over the years. So yeah, if you're willing, if you're keen, let's give it a go.
I'm ready. I don't know how you prepare for this, but I'm ready. I'm ready. Let's give it a shot.
Let's do it.
So, Kenny, you have 30 seconds to defend the following statement. Space projects are easy. You don't need to worry about schedule or cost. Discuss.
Oh, that's that statement. Okay. So there is nothing easy about cutting edge space projects, I'll say. Like I said at the beginning, no project is the same. So when it comes to impacting some new aspect of space, you're usually looking at the only thing that stays consistent is how you put it into space. Now, we're not going to constantly send the same mission up to do the exact same thing. So for that, obviously, you need to look at new ways to do stuff. There's new technologies, there's new optical lasers, technology that you can put onto satellites to see even further out into the galaxy. And even what's even more important is with all the space debris and things like that we mentioned earlier, it's getting even harder to transmit that information back to us. So, so as our technology develops, it has to constantly develop on both ends. So how do you get your information back? How do you send your information up? And how do you ultimately design and build this thing so that you can now build it, design it, launch it in an affordable way that does not impact the planet? As we know, that's a huge topic nowadays. So now we're making that conversion to more reusable technology and rockets that can be launched more than once, and launching rockets with methane and things of that nature. So it's a developing business that has to move in tandem with society as well. And not only that, it's also an international field. You got to work across multiple time zones, which isn't easy by any regard, right? So there's a lot of different factors, a lot of moving parts. So hopefully my mind running too quick was able to partially defend that.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot.
That was excellent.
That was fun.
That was excellent. I think we need to try and somehow get Elon Musk on here and give him that statement. And he'd probably say, yeah, money's not an issue. It's all good.
Right.
100% in. All in on black.
Hollywood, just do it. Just do it. Doesn't matter.
No, thank you, Kenny, for being such a great sport. It's been, I think for me, the overriding feeling for this podcast has been it's been inspirational talking to you. And thank you so much for your time. And we'd love to get you back once you've traveled to space to tell us about that experience. So we're going to hold you to that. On your part about how you get into NASA, I think Val and I and Martin are just going to email our CVs across straight after this recording.
Do that.
I'm just kidding.
I always feel like I disappoint folks with that answer, because I feel like people are going to think I'm just going to say, oh yeah, just go to this website. We're hiring all the time. This is how you do it. But it's such a roundabout way to get there.
No, it's doing special things needs to have special people, and anyone can be that special person. And I think you alluded to, you've got to set your mind to it. You've got to work hard. And if you're in the right space in the right time, and you've put the hard work in, that will come if that's what you want to do. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Just before we end, I want to come to you for any final words you want to leave our listeners with, Kenny.
So something I always like to leave listeners with, no matter what your age, what your background, what your experience level is, I invite people to openly accept their failures within this industry. It's a really tough field. You're going to experience failure throughout. Not only fail early and fail fast, or fail fast and fail early. You need to also take those lessons learned and apply them to not only your projects, but also those relationships that you have in terms of mentor-mentee relationships, because that is how you build and foster those relationships, and it helps develop that transparency as well. And at the end of the day, it helps you become a much better project manager, in my opinion. And I've had a lot of leaders that have been transparent with me in terms of either triple constraints or the methodology that they use to say, hey, this worked in this situation, this didn't work in this situation. I think that has ultimately given me a leg up in a lot of situations that I've dealt with. So welcome and internalize those failures, and don't shy away from it, because everyone fails, is what I'll leave our listeners with.
Brilliant advice. I couldn't agree more. If I adopted just being more comfortable with failure early on in my career, I think I'd be far more ahead. But yeah, thank you so much for that.
We all? Wouldn't we all?
Exactly.
We would be,
but
yeah.
how do you tell a 20-year-old, that it's okay to fail? Not going to happen.
You can't. You can't.
Exactly. Val, any final thoughts from you?
No, just stay on the same sentiment. I think it's something that should kind of, as a trickle down economy, it should start at the schools. I don't think we educate that failure is a strength and it's part of success. That's part of the process, is to screw up and be transparent about it as well. Be open and honest, and that level of integrity is actually something that I really endorse on projects too. So I completely subscribe to the moral leadership methodology. Is that if you see something's wrong, you see something's not right, call it out. But also, just be human about it. I think that's important. We can talk about machine learning and all these toys we like to use, but ultimately what gets projects across the line is teamwork, culture, having each other's backs, having the best and brightest in the room. That's what it's all about. But I really appreciate it. This was a great pod. You're our first kind of space subject matter expert. So it was great to have you on board. Hopefully you got something out of it too. And we would love to come over at some point when COVID lets us and get a tour. That'd be fantastic.
Definitely. It's been fun. Really, it's been an honor to be here. You guys ask a lot of really good questions and help challenge me. As you said earlier, I'm in my doctoral right now, so a lot of these topics are kind of fresh in my brain. So I'm able to not only use them in the real world, but also use them when I'm writing papers and doing all that other stuff. So it was really fun. I was really excited to be here.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks,
for everything you've shared today, and also particularly that you've got a young one and sleepless nights doctorate, plus you're able to share everything. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Kenny, just before we go, last couple of minutes, we've got a pop quiz called Tenor. 10 questions and answers. Are you up for that?
Yeah, I was about to say another surprise.
Brilliant. No, we love surprises at the end. So for this, I'm going to hand over to Martin to take you through it.
Yeah, cool. As Dale said, 10 quickfire questions, all about you, nothing complex here. So, okay, let's make a start. So number one, what's your morning routine?
Get up and change a diaper.
The babies, yeah?
Yeah.
Excited. Number two, would you rather spend your day with people or technology?
People.
Nice. Okay, number three, how do you deal with stress?
I like to cook. I really like to cook. And I know some people, that stresses some people out, but I actually really like to cook and to learn how to cook different cuisines from around the world. That's something that's entertaining for me.
Any particular favorites you got?
No, I'm really big on pasta, to be honest with you.
Oh,
I'm really big on pasta. Yeah, one of my favorite places on earth. I haven't been everywhere. One of the favorite places I've been is Positano, Italy. One of my favorite places.
Nice.
I need to come to Australia though.
Anytime, buddy. I'll give you a tour.
Oh yeah.
Great. What's the best book you've been gifted?
Oh man. The digital transformation. I forgot who the author is, but it deals with how companies are shifting more into the digital era and how their higher ups and developing those thinkings amongst them, or that thought process amongst them.
Oh, great. Okay, sounds good. We think Val and I were just noting that down.
Yeah.
Okay, next. If you could choose to spend the day with anyone, past or present, who would it be and why?
I have actually, it's someone that I have not done this with already, I assume.
Yeah. So, it could be anyone, anyone you like.
So we have a former NASA administrator, Major General Charlie Bolden would be someone that I really would like to spend a full day with. Him and I know each other very closely. You know, we've been to events and stuff together, but he's a former astronaut, former captain astronaut, former NASA administrator for several years under the Obama administration. And he is just a great person to emulate, a great person to learn from. So I would love to spend the day with him.
Oh, great. Sounds like a fascinating guy there.
Oh yeah.
Great. Okay, next, number 6. What's the greatest bit of advice you've ever been given?
So a lot of stuff came to mind. I'm trying to dial it back toward engineering, but greatest advice I've ever been given. So greatest advice I've ever been given. Again, I said it earlier, was to fail fast and fail early, or fail early, fail fast, however you want to say it. And really to embrace those failures, not just go out there seeking to fail, but obviously to know that it's okay, and to take them and use them as fuel to get you even further. And I've experienced that a lot throughout my career.
Definitely, it's a great message. You can see all nodding heads there. That's good. Okay, next, what's the biggest mistake you've made on a project?
For transparency, when I was younger, I designed this full component out of tungsten. And for listeners that don't know, tungsten is a really dense, really heavy material that you can't fly with. So I developed this whole material based around tungsten, and it didn't work. Let's just boil it down to that. It didn't work. And that's not the biggest, I'll say, but that's one of the early mistakes that I learned. It's kind of just a fun story.
It goes back to the lesson learned. Don't work with tungsten.
Exactly.
Great. Next one. What would you tell your 10-year-old self?
I would tell him that your art skills are going to pay off, because at that point I didn't really know anything about CAD, but I was really into drawing Pokemon at that time. I was really into Pokemon when I was young. So I used to sketch and doodle and draw those all the time. And I decided, hey, I want to be an artist, or I want to go into the field of the arts and things like that. And I made a pivot, and I can now, I'm one of the best CADers or 3D designers thanks to, or I used to be from all those days doodling, I would say.
Oh, nice. So yeah, effort well spent. That sounds
like. Yeah, exactly.
Great. Next, what profession other than your own would you have liked to have attempted?
Chef.
Chef.
I like to be a chef. Again, it's a stress relief for me. Again, I think I'm good at it. My wife and some of my friends say I'm good at it, but I think definitely some training would help a lot. And I think it'd be a good field to get into.
That's great. It's whatever you're passionate about, so it's really good.
Yeah.
Okay, last one. If you had $1 million to spend in a day, what would you spend it on?
Good question. Never prepared for a question like this. $1 million. It's a lot of money. I would invest some. I'd save some. I'd buy some nice things, and then I'd ultimately travel. Like I said, travel is really big for me. I like to explore new places, new things. So I would get out and travel. And while I'm there, obviously visit different space facilities. I feel like that'd be a cool experience. Tie it all into my career, right?
Very wise. You got that money distributed well there. So.
Oh yeah.
Not spend it on nappies.
No.
Yeah. No, thank you, Kenny, for being such an amazing sport. As we said, it's been fun. The whole pod's been amazing fun. We've been like little giddy kids here, as well, just wanting to get all of this NASA experience, because it's something, very foreign to us. And I'm sure a lot of the listeners will appreciate all of your insight as well. So thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you. I thought you were about to surprise me with something else. It's another lightning round.
Nah, we've only got two. We'll surprise you when you're back. When after you go to space and you come back, we'll give you a few more surprises in there. But we'll be sure to keep in touch and hook up, as Val says, if time and space allows.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
So folks, that is all the time we have on this episode, but it doesn't have to stop here. Support our charities and access blogs at projectchatterpodcast.com. Don't forget to hit subscribe on our YouTube channel and your favorite podcast player so you don't miss the next one. A massive, massive thank you to Kenneth Harris II, and thank you all for listening. Till next time, we say stay safe, be disruptive, and have fun doing it. From me, Val, and Martin, it's bye for now.